Recording. How are we doing on the exercise? Everyone is good? Almost? Did someone manage to pull the data and put it in the HTML file so that it's like nice and CSS?
What is that?
It's just a link.
Which we can't because you just copy them.
And we keep listening. And we can customize them. It will be like alternate for every
What it shows.
Should we like get the data and put it like in an HTML file? Just do this example exactly with the astronaut.
I'm gonna tell you what I should show.
Oh.
Here we are doing the response.
How far is everyone? Can you? Were you able to like log out the astronaut? Like that?
Should we try to do a little example
You can't.
up here where you can see it?
Yeah.
All right, so I created a little index file that loads this main.js file, which is actually not going to work probably because there's a lot of stuff in here. That's fine. So to try to do this example here, this assignment, where did it go? It went here with the astronauts. So we fetch the data from the API. I assume most people did that. Console log it out maybe. And then at the end, you wanted to write it into the DOM. You want to fetch the data and write it onto the website. So let's try to do, let me just comment all this stuff out that I did. Just so we have no weird stuff. Okay. So let's try to start fetching it. So we will make a function that will fetch data. A little wrapper function that works for, and it will return the fetch with the URL for the API. All right? Or we could just do it directly, actually. Okay, so we'll make a little button here. Let's make a little button here where we can call it. So this is my HTML. You can see that it loads a style sheet and it loads the main.js, the file that I'm editing right now. So this is basic HTML, just like you should have seen. So we'll make a button here. Give it an ID that will be called fetch data. Call fetch, and we will return the button. So when this button is clicked, I want to do all the things that were in the assignment. So we'll start by adding a document. You remember it? Get event listener, set event listener. Add event listener. Listener. would be nice if it suggested it. First need to get the element right. The element by ID. What did I call it? Fetch data. Fetch data. And then we will set a add event listener. Click. Yes. Click and the function. Okay. Let's just see if it works. Further. So we have the little button here. Click fetch. Didn't console log anything. This thing is too big. There we go. You can see it made the request to the API. See here, and it gave an error. Failed to fetch. Is that what you got before? Let's try to do it then. So just like before, we have the response, and we call response JSON to get it as a JSON format. And then I have my data. Let's call it result. And we will try to, we could call it whatever we want. Response and result is actually the normal one, so I should have probably called that before. I can name it that before. So we will log out the result. Try it again. Fetch. Still doesn't work for some reason. Is it down?
Okay, you could configure the data.
Well, I'm just wondering if my internet is down. Oh, I have no internet. Does anyone else have internet? Yes? That's great. That's awesome. There we go. It's back. Let's try it again.
Maybe our IP is calling it open.
Maybe, yeah. Well, I can't even go to Google, so. But I have no internet. That's great.
What about me?
That is so stupid. I'm able to connect to this network. Yeah. No. Let's do it. Does it work for you? Try to enable it. Yeah. Yeah.
Have some technical problems here.
No, it works.
Fine. This we can,
You open it in the browser. Work again? Did not work again. Yeah, mine's not good. Fucking hell, man. Technical difficulties?
Figure out whether you have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you still need a policy.
What? Okay. So we're back again.
Can everyone put their hands up? Great.
So let's see, if I click this now, I get the result, right? So I click the button, I get the result. And I use this event listener that you learned previously. So we want to render this into the page somehow. I have made this div that has ID root, and I will put it in that one. So this result here, let's just see what it looked like. So we have people, and we have a number here. And I want to show this here. I'm just going to copy that so we have it in the code. So let's make a new function that will be our callback, and we will call that render output data. And we want to render this bit here. So you remember how we do that? Create element. Let's call it wrapper div. Always a good name. Document create element. Element div. So I create an element in the DOM, which is a div. And then I want to import this, and this is going to be fairly complex HTML, so I don't want to create a ton of input with IDs and fit it into everything, because it gets a little stupid. So let's just try to make a output, make that into a string. So we want to have the title, strong, bold, and we want to have this name here. We actually should put it in a paragraph. I want to have this, and then I want to replace this with the data from the API. So we can use brackets, data, number. Or you can use people length. You can see the output had already, it already had the number here, so it's already calculated for you, but you can do it yourself as well if you want to. Okay, so we have that, and then we will make a list of astronaut names, right? And this will be a dynamic list. So how do we loop the people? Do we use what method would we use to loop an array? Convert it into something else? Map? Map or for each? Yeah. Which one do you like? Map. Okay, so we will call this the output people, and we will loop this people map, and we will have one person. First argument will be each person. Okay, let's see what it looks like. It looks like an array here, yeah. Person dot name, yeah. So there's the craft, probably only one, and then the name. So we will just use the name. And we want to output this in a list. Does that make sense? I think a list makes sense. So we will return do you remember what the list HTML tag is? li. We'll do that. Then we will say person name. So what does output people contain now? An array of of these, right? So a string that has this list and the names, right? The list always needs a wrapper around it, so this will be an unordered list, UL. Also exist ordered lists. So how do we output an array of strings into this one? Do you know that? Have you had that? No. You have an output, an array full of strings, and you want to print them all at one time. Will this one work? Can I just do this?
Yeah, it should work, right? Because it's entirely live.
Well, what data type is output people? Is that a string? It returns a string, but the output an array. Yeah. So it's an array of strings. It's an array of strings. You want to output all of them. We do this.
Yes.
Now, well, then you only output the first one, right? What if there's no one there? Then they would fail. We don't know how many there is. Good. Let me just. I'm not. Do you have join? Yeah. All right. So you can join an array, right? You can call join command, and then you can take all the values and join them into a single value. If we take an array of strings, we can join them by a string. So we just put them all in one big line, right? And then we can output. This should work. Hopefully. Okay. So last thing, we need to put the output that we generated into the div that we made. We want to put this into the root. We'll probably just put it directly into the root. Yeah, let's get rid of this one. So we have the root element up here at the beginning. Let me know if I lose people on this. So we get the root from the page that document element by ID root. This is the root element. Right? So I put this in. I just use inner HTML equals the output. Will work? Maybe? I have one thing missing here. So now we have the fetch data, which fetches the data, and I want to call it inside my callback. So to get the data in here, just like we did before. Yes, exactly. Let's try to see if it works. Fetch. Okay.
This is exactly how Facebook chats, right? It gets data from the and puts in your little chat window. So whenever you use an app on your computer, Slack, whatever, it's just this, just pushing JSON from server and back and rendering it in HTML.
Yeah, that's how you make websites, basically.
We are by using map, and you return the LIs, right? So we have not created the LI. So, like, how does it know that LI should be created?
Well, this is the magic of, like, you could create it if you did this document create element. You could create all of them separately. If you use inner HTML where you want to put it, then you can write it as text, and the browser will convert it. Maybe I shouldn't have showed you. Huh? It's just a string. It's just when you use inner HTML, the inner HTML attribute, when you use that on a DOM element, you said inner HTML, it just means just dump this whole text in, and that's all HTML, and then it'll figure it out. If you write it in the other way, where you have to create element li, and then you have to append child every time, you can. That is the. Maybe I shouldn't have taught you the shortcut. Huh? That is like the harder way to do it. This is an easier way to do it.
But like if you go towards React, like what we're gonna have next after the modules, React does similar things like this. For the description of both. Because if you ever encounter code which does it differently, then you're lost. If you don't know.
Yes. And this is infinitely more readable than create element li. All this. Yeah.
But it also adds HTML into your code,
Yes.
which is bad practice.
Yes. Once you learn React, you'll never do this again. Like, because there's a much better way of handling it. So this is more low-level JavaScript. Let's just show one thing here. So this method here, I just take result, I log it out, and then I give it to the callback. Right? I could just write it like this. So it just gives it directly to the callback. I don't have to have all these extra lines. So this is also more readable. Okay? Okay. We'll leave this one. I'll put it up on the Slack when we're all done. You can see the examples. So we'll touch on a different.
What is that?
Sorry.
What is that called? I mean, I want to learn more about like how you have returned the LI as such without using the key. In fact, 66.
Oh,
line
sorry.
66.
Yes.
Yeah, what is it called? I mean,
What are we googling for?
String literals.
Yeah.
String literals. Yeah. It's just string.
It's this one.
And you, yeah, it's called string literals, and you put HTML in there.
And try to output it just to see what it looks like.
So it's basically just a string, and then you know string literals,
Yeah.
and then you just put HTML in there. You put HTML code into those.
So it just looks like this, right? So we create the array, it just looks like this.
Wow, that's really nice.
But it's not it's not the most. You see that you have HTML and JavaScript mixed up now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's
Is that a good practice?
no.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, because now if you want to have a class on LI, you have to add it inside of JavaScript, and
Can you add classes inside JavaScript?
you can just
You can write
just
here.
like this now.
I can just write it. Oh, sorry. It's not there.
And now now your code becomes very complicated.
Yes.
Because you cannot access that class through the JavaScript.
You can.
If you write the class there, can you access the class?
You have to do it after you put it into the
Yeah.
DOM. So if you access it after this line here,
So
you
now
can.
it
If you do it
becomes-
before, it will come above. Yeah.
Because it's super complex.
For now, this is
We have
fine.
an idea here, but if I don't want to do it like that, but I want to do it in a proper way at home when we do the validation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go. I just want this as a reference, but I want to do it like a way, right? Not like this in the future. If I get something like this.
Like let me say this: in the future, you will learn React,
Okay.
and React takes care of this for you.
Yeah. The problem is if you want to do it the other way with create element, you can, but you're still going to have all the code inside JavaScript. You're just going to write it in a different way. Or you can put it all in the index file, and you can use IDs for everything. That would separate it, but how would you handle a dynamic list? That would be weird because you don't know how many ALE you need. So there are problems. All the solutions have problems, but the answer is that it's like modern frameworks take care of this part. So you don't need to do this. You will rarely
It's a good
see it.
exercise to do it with 10 child, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, we did it. We actually discussed it. We did the first class, and then we discussed our last class of JavaScript 2. Then we kind of mix it. It makes more sense we learned like last week than 3 weeks ago. Then we
JavaScript
tried it.
week 1, and we had this DOM thing.
Yeah.
And we had an exercise to do where we had to create with dynamic events and LIs and details. And we had to write the code for that, and there was a solution that was created by the person who wrote the homework. And it was like this.
Yeah.
It was in 3 lines, and we wrote it like maybe 15 lines or
Yeah.
15 lines.
Welcome.
Wow.
Yeah. There's this map, reduce, and filter.
Yeah.
These are concepts from functional languages, and what we are learning here is more like object-oriented and serialized content. But there are programming language I can't write, I don't understand, because they have a completely different concept, completely abstract. Yeah. So get used to different methods of solving the same thing. And there's often it's not this is true or this is true. And in JavaScript, often it's like in 2012 this was true.
Yeah. It changes every couple of years. I will say if you need to output HTML, just my personal opinion, I prefer this compared to create element because it's just more readable than having like massive blocks of DOM elements. Okay, so let's try to leave this for now. Just comment this out, and I will save my just comment out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about APIs. So the API we used before was completely open. You just called it and you get data. It's just not that common. Like normally there's some kind of API key, which is a password that you need to be able to access it. Either a password you get if someone has a private API and you're the only person who can access it, then you get a specific key. Or if you access Google Maps, for instance, on an API, you also need to generate a free key, which monitors your usage. So if Google finds out that you're calling millions and millions of requests every day, they might turn your key off. So they have a little bit of control. So we'll get a little example of how these API keys work. So I found a different API here. Let's do this one. So I'm sure some people know IMDb, Internet Movie Database. Everyone knows that one. So IMDb is a closed API. You will not be able to access this directly because it's their own site, right? So someone, because the internet can do all kinds of things, so someone made the Open Movie Database API. So this is normal people who type in all this movie stuff, like who was in it, when it was published, what score does it have, the posters, everything. So they have an API that is open that everyone can use. But you need the API key, and it's free to get. So if you go in here, you can type free, you can type in your email address, and you will get an API key for this API. I already did it. So you type in your email, name, last name, you'll get a key so you can access it. Let's try to look what the API looks like.
You also see there's this radio button and free, and it says 1,000 daily limit. So that's the amount of calls you can make on a daily basis. But 1,000 is enough, right?
So let's see here. So there's a little. Can you see the screen? No. I love responsive sites. So send all data requests to this URL, and then you can see it says your key. So you insert your key here, and then it will authorize that this is you, so they can count that 1,000 free requests you get. So as soon as you get over 1,000, they will shut your key off.
And that also tracks my activity, because the data.
I don't know what they track. The APIs are implemented on the server, so they can track whatever they want compared to your key. They have your key, they have your personal information. So in theory, they can see what requests you make if they implemented that. But who knows?
So why did we use this API?
I'm just using as an example for APIs that use a key. Because they did homework, you will have an API that will use a key. So it's a good thing to do. So let's try to take this here. Already have it here. Let's just make a request actually from the. Let's just try to make a fetch request for this. See this again. So the API gives a response back. You can also check the network tab. You can see the request here. You can see what response it gives. Response, false, error, something went wrong. But at least it tells us something happened. So we got a response from the server and it just tells us this. The reason it does that is because we didn't implement the API. We just sent the request to this endpoint. You look at how this API works. There are these parameters. So we can give it certain parameters. An interesting one is this I parameter. It says a valid IMDb ID. Let's try that. Oh, I put it in the console. Let's just write it here. Fetch. It says I. It says string literals. Then we do the same as we did before. Okay, so we're going to find a IMDb ID. Oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, so go to IMDb, find a movie we like. I like Star Wars. You want Jumanji? You see this ID here? This is an ID in the string. Take that, put it back here, and then add this and see if it works as part of the URL, right? So let's try this and see if it works. I'm just going to change this to var so I don't break my console. See? So I get a JSON response back with the data, so I can build my own IMDb if I wanted to. You can only get 1,000 requests today. So you see here, that's everything that you need. Ratings, IDs, type, so on. Okay? But APIs can typically do other things. It depends on where you implement it. But this one here can say by ID or title, so that's fetching one movie. Or you can use search, where you can search for movies. And it has a parameter called S, and then movie title to search for is what it means.
What will the search give you back? A lot of things, definitely. An array, right? And each array, element in an array is an object, and like more like data, more like abstract. Each is a movie, right?
Let's try it. So we changed the parameter to S. Then I made this little search query. Let's search for Harry Potter. See what it looks like. Paste. See, I got a different result back now. Total results 81. It only gives me the first 10. Probably means there's some I can show you afterwards. So now I can make a search function. You could build a little input field where you can search for these kind of things.
But I just have a question.
Yes.
I just type HAR and can I get like, I just type HAR or I just type TER, like fuzzy search? How can we do that? Because we had an exercise like that and
I mean, like
You want to search while you type, right? And then search dynamically while you type.
like these are two different things, right? Like this is like a search from the server, and it gives you back an array. And the fuzzy search from JavaScript3, you have an array.
Yeah, that was like a very small thing, but I just wanted to know the idea. That exercise is like small, I understand, but search is like how we search in this website, but it's like the same. In Google, we're allowed to do the fuzzy search, but people are able to get.
But it depends on the person who built Google. So it depends on the person who built.
The problem with doing it in something like this, you only have 1,000 requests a day. So if I write Harry Potter, I will use 10 or 12 just by that single query. So the load on the server will be that much bigger. But it's possible to do it. You could do it on, if you do on key down on the key. Like, should I show it? You want to do a small example? Do a form. Test form.
We can do that because Anisha asked us to for us do the one. So she just asked us. But I was just having that in my mind like how.
But the exercise that we all does, I think.
No, we can do that.
No, I am talking about. There was an exercise with etc. And then we searched like word and then contains and
Oh, yeah, the voice assistant.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
So it is that
That was not necessary. Like we were just using.
we were doing search for particular words. And if it's like what, like is a question,
Well, what you can do here, like to go back to the browser. So now you see if you can array back. Now you can have another search field, which does a fuzzy search on the data you got back.
Yeah.
So now you have two different searches. One search gets the data, and the other search does on your inside of your browser. So I think you're more confused because both of things are called search.
Should we do a little search example, HTML? Are you good? Okay. So we make a little form here. ID test form. We have a text field called query, and we have a button to submit it, right? This is pretty basic form. It does nothing for now, but it's here. I type something in, I can click search, it refreshes the screen. Okay, so let's try to get let's just leave this for now. So first we want to add an event handler to the form, right? So when the form submits, we want to not submit it normally, we want to do this API integration that we have, so search on the API. So let's try to do the same as we did before, document, get element by ID, test form, add event listener. What's it called for a form when it submits? What's the event? No? Before it was click when I click the button, right? But I don't click a form, I submit a form. Okay, and we will call the callback handle submit. So we will make a function here that's called handle submit. In submitting a form through JavaScript events, the first parameter, remember what that is? The event. We want to make sure that the form doesn't do what it normally does. So we do event prevent default. It means that it won't submit the page in the HTML. It will only run my code. You can see the difference. Might be a little abstract, but let's try the difference here. See, when I type something now, the screen refresh. See every time, because the form submits like it would, like a normal HTML form. If I add this prevent default, it no longer refreshes because it's captured by the JavaScript and it doesn't do the default action, which is submitting. Okay, so I want to get the query. Const query, and I had that get element by ID. What do I call it? Query. Prevent default is a function that is tied to this event class. Then when you use add event listener, it will always give the first argument will always be the event class. And you can do this. Prevent default is the most common. There's a few other things you can do. All right, so let's try to take the element query, and we want to have the value. Yes? Try to console log that. So we type something here, and it logs it to the console. So capture the input field by the ID, take the value. So now we have our search field. So now we want to wrap all this. I will just leave this actually into a new function that we call it fetch movie search something, right? It takes the query as parameter, then it calls all this with the query. So now it's dynamic, right? Instead of hard coding it before, now it will just return the result as I type, or as I search. Try Harry Potter again. Oh, I forgot to call the method. There we go. Harry Potter. Now it's dynamic, right? So I can search for something else. Indiana Jones. Now I get this way.
Great example.
Yeah.
My last name is Jones.
So if we want to have the same as we had before, we can output it as well, right? You could output the list. Next time we have, so it's fine. I'll just take the root again. And then we will output the list of movies. So the query had a result called search in the JSON. So I will take, let's just call that output string again. Output movies. So query, search, and it's an array. How do we loop an array? Map.
But you have to write.
Oh. Yeah, this is not going to happen. Let's make a new function. So we have the callback comes from here, right? So obviously I need a new function for this. Output movies. Movies. So let's try this again. So I will say movies. So movies, search movie, and then we will create the string again. Return list, and we called that, it's called title, right? We just want to output the title. We could output something else, but for now we're just going to do the title. We don't want to make this example too massive, and it already is. Yeah? Then we put it into the root with in HTML. Then we need to exchange this one to our callback, which renders the movies that we get back from the server.
We have to join the movie.
All right, we need to join it. We just need that. Just like we did before. We'll go over it. I need to wrap it, right? Because the list element can't be in its own. It needs to have the unordered list around it, right? See if it'll work. I know it went a little fast, but I want to have time for the last exercise. Harry Potter. There we go. We can try something else. John Wick. See? Now we have a search option.
That's quite cool, right? So these things come together.
Yeah. So once you use an API like this, all the integration you get access to is what someone else did, and you can just make a really simple implementation like that, and it works. Of course, it needs a little polish, but overall it works.
You're very lucky. When I started programming, there were no APIs.
Yeah.
We had no backticks either, right?
No backticks. There was, back then there was only HTML. And that's why we had to do prevent default.
Yeah.
Because there was no JavaScript which does all those things.
Okay.
There's if you go into your code, inside of your there's 106. There's a redundant line.
Oh. There's probably like something like an API key you would usually also extract. This is the one place where you don't use camel case. Things like this that are absolutely constant, that will never change. It's good to write it like this. You can also write a camel case, but now it's very obvious that this key comes from the program and is something that will never change. So we write it uppercase with underscore. Constants. Fairly readable. Okay, so we have half an hour left, and we have one exercise left. The dog fan website. What?
So fast and spontaneous.
That's all control.
Yeah. When you've done it long enough, it gets easier with time. Yeah. Then you have to do it yourself.
Yeah, first like 3 days later.
That's why the best thing is to actually try it yourself, because just reading it or seeing someone else do it, it's like, oh, this is super simple. Even for me as well, when I see your YouTube videos, it looks super simple, and then 5 minutes later, when I have to do it myself, I forget all of it. Yeah, it's recording.
You're going on holidays and that will take us a week or so.
Yeah.
You can just write us in Slack. Like I will answer you if you write.
Really on holidays?
Christmas Eve.
Not during dinner on the 24th.
On the 31.
Then we can meet in the dark. But no, just write. But like what I like to say is like if you write me personally, I'm like okay, I'm gonna answer to you. But like it's very nice if you also answer your question in the channel. Because then I answer it, and if someone else runs into the same problem, they will see it as well.
But I think us we are really good to do everything in the channel, right? I don't write personally.
Also the questions on even half with your parents.
That's good. That's good.
A lot like just asking and respecting and swatting to answer.
Sometimes I feel, oh, I'm asking too many questions. I just
I have a problem. So
Please ask.
And if you're asking a question, then I know I'm screwed, because if you don't follow, I'm not gonna follow.
It's really first steps forward, you know. And what we might be thinking, and after a week,
But be sure, like the situation you're in right now, I was in there. Sometimes when I learn a new language, I'm in your same position. Someone does something, it looks like magic. Yeah. Usually you get things by exposure and experience. That's it. You can also link in.
Oh, good job. Hope it's quiet.
No. It's good that they start coding. It's also good to give them the example that everything is in HTML. You know, you sort in smart. That's usually the thing. People start smiling. You're like, wow, this I can do now. I also start like in JavaScript. Okay. So like I did like this now. So
I'm just trying to analyze it.
I can help you just doing these.
stuff.